Welcome to Straight Talking Law. I'm Michael Horn, a director at Kidwell's Law Solicitors, and I'm with Abby.
Yeah, Abby Washbourne. I'm a solicitor and director of the Criminal and Family Departments at Kidwell Solicitors.
And today's podcast is about young people, really. And we're talking about up to 16, and then 16 to 18, and then above 18s are for another day.
Yeah.
Basically. And we'll be talking about this in regard to several different areas, and they're going to overlap because they're all a little bit pervasive, aren't they? So we're talking about just young people generally, what the cutoff is for the family courts, where the courts won't get involved with the child anymore, and then how that might look as far as contracting, social media. And then we'll be just moving over then into possibly some criminal aspects of that. Do you reckon that might be a good starting point, Abby?
I think so. I think because there's some common myths when people reach the age of 16, either that they are now an adult so they can make all of the decisions, which isn't always the case. And some people think that people under 16 can't make any decisions, which also isn't always the case. So I think the way in which you've proposed that we break that down would be really helpful, I think, to the listeners.
So I always remember when I was studying law all those years ago, more years than I tend to remember, we were taught about the case of Gillick.
Yeah.
And that's really an eye-opener, because to me what that says is that if a young person is able to understand what's going on, then the courts, social workers, etc., need to have a listen to them.
Yeah, and that's really pertinent, isn't it, in the context of the family arena?
Yeah.
Because actually, even though a child might not be the age of 16, as they are, usually around 12-ish, they start to really understand what's going on around them, and they can make some informed decisions. The courts will take that into account, and so will social workers in their recommendations to the court.
Yeah, and that's called Gillick competence.
Yeah.
And it comes about, doesn't it, from a young girl asking a doctor to assist with being on the contraceptive pill. I don't think that was for sexual purposes. I think it was for medical reasons.
Yeah.
And so it brought about the question of, when is a child able to start making decisions for themselves?
Yeah, and there's no hard and fast rule, when your child reaches the age of 12 that they can make all of these decisions, for example, because actually it's dependent on a case-by-case basis. Some children mature at different rates, and the court assess that, and the court assess what the children understand and how much weight they will give to their wishes and feelings.
I think that's right, and you and I both come across cases where these youngsters, we're going to still call them children, they're under the age of 16, so about 12-ish, thereabouts.
Yeah.
They are capable of making decisions about certain things, and I know that nowadays children of 12 or so have got their own social diaries. They know where they're going, what dates, and who they're going to see, etc. What really disrupts everything is when those children start talking about adult issues in the relationship breakdown between the parents.
And although they might think that they understand, they don't necessarily always understand the consequences of those big decisions, whether or not I want to have a relationship with dad, for example, or mum, or another family member. And so the court will assess it with the help of social services and CAFCAS, who can be appointed, in order to seek their direction as to really the assessment of that child and how much they can make a decision.
Yeah, well, we don't want to harbour on that particular, because we've got a wide variety. Yeah. But mum and dad, or dad and dad, mum and mum, however the family dynamic is, you need to be extremely careful, I assert, not to involve the children in adult issues. Separate those worlds for the children, because even though they're capable of making decisions, Gillick competence. They shouldn't be involved in adult issues. So draw a line under those adult issues, keep them away from the children, don't talk in front of them, etc., about how much you dislike what's going on, possibly through the family courts. So talking about the family courts, then moving on from Gillick, at the age of 16, what will a court do? How will a court get involved with a child?
Generally, they won't like to get involved with a child at that age. There are obviously some exceptions to that rule. If a child is particularly vulnerable or something particularly harmful going on, they might well intervene.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, they don't want to intervene when the child reaches the age of 16.
So from the child's point of view, at 16, really, you're starting to be on your own as far as the law is concerned by way of caring, but you're crossing over that line into liability.
Yes.
So you're leaving one world behind and you're entering into another one.
Yeah.
And that's a liability in law for your actions.
Yeah.
But also, you can make decisions for yourself, certain decisions. And one of those decisions, of course, is whom you might have sexual contact with.
Yeah,
at 16.
That's quite an important decision, isn't it, for a child that reaches the age of 16? It's quite a fundamental one.
Yeah. What worries me really nowadays is about the world has become so small through social media links. And it's very concerning that youngsters are being exposed to worldwide issues, which is good in one way, but it's really not very good when it comes to exposing them to advanced sexual contact of one kind or another, instead of allowing them to find their feet and experience safely in amongst their peers. So that's a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a concern, I think, particularly because they navigate social media and the internet better than perhaps their parents do. Their parents can't necessarily safeguard them in the same way they usually would, because they might not be aware of what's going on the internet or what contact they are being susceptible to. For example, you hear all the time, don't you, of children being groomed or coerced in one way or the other. And it's, although they're 16 and they feel like they understand the world around them, actually they don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the same throughout somebody's entire life. As you get older, you realize you might not know everything, but you might think that you know enough about some things. And unfortunately for 16-year-olds, that's the case for everything, possibly.
Yeah.
So and I notice, me especially, being slightly older, I don't know enough about the internet, these social media platforms, and I see everybody is glued to their telephone or their tablet, and they're connected to even the person that they're sat next to. They're not talking to them, they're messaging with them through their device. That's right, isn't it?
And some of those platforms include something like Snapchat, for example, where you can't retrieve messages, and that might become an issue, which we'll discuss a little bit later on in the podcast when it comes down to a criminal investigation, for example.
Of which you and I have massive experience in through our roles as criminal solicitors.
Yes, definitely. And we assist all of the time young people who might find themselves, subject to certain allegations as a result of what they thought was quite an innocent, just exploring really between themselves, between them as a couple. They might find themselves susceptible to quite serious allegations. And it might well be that those messages on their Snapchat would be really key evidence in determining the fact that they actually didn't do what was alleged. And the problem is young people don't necessarily understand or can't risk assess in the same way that an adult would about those things, which again makes them vulnerable.
Yeah, Snapchat's a throwaway conversation. It happens and it disappears. I think you can save some chats within Snapchat, but I think the whole conversation isn't automatically saved.
Yeah, that's right. So you can save some messages. You can also screenshot messages, but then the recipient of those messages is also aware that you screenshotted, which might cause difficulties, which might dissuade people from screenshotting certain messages. And really, I think it's changed the way that young people communicate, but that can also be quite difficult, can't it?
I don't subscribe to it. I'll be honest. I think that if you've got a communication via email, text, or whatever, my advice to everybody is make sure you keep it, because even if it's just a misunderstanding about what time you're going to meet somebody for football or netball or whatever it is you do, you've got the proof. But also, if somebody then says later you said or did something that you would kind of like to say you didn't, if you've got normal messages that you've saved, you've backed up, then you can demonstrate the conversation. Snapchat throws it all away.
Yeah, and it might even be innocent conversations, just demonstrating the context of which you communicate with that person. It might not be what that police officer investigating your case deems to be normal, but you might be able to show in the context of your relationship, in fact, it was normal. And that can be demonstrated by a very innocent conversation, which you don't have if you've not saved it.
The thing that I think is a shock for most youngsters is that they haven't quite realised yet that pretty much everybody is capable of lying when they're being put on the spot for something else.
Yeah, and that's an issue that we come across frequently, isn't it?
Regularly. And so we say, in isolation, one sentence that might be saved in one of these screenshots, it could mean any number of things. Whereas in actual fact, if you can see the full conversation, it didn't mean what they're saying it meant anyway. What really, which I've come across, and I know you've come across, we've done it together when we've been looking after clients together, is that a client will receive a message and they'll click on that message to lead to another message through social media or another site. So they might get a harmless something that might seem funny or a little bit sexy, and you click on it and it opens you up to another world. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes it can mean that some materials downloaded to people's devices that they weren't necessarily aware of or looking for, which may be a criminal offence, whether that could be, extreme indecent images, for example.
Yeah.
We've come across that quite frequently, haven't we?
Yeah, well, let's just go back a sentence on that, I think, because actually, if you are sexting, which, as I understand it, is sex conversations by way of text, but it isn't just text. It can be Snapchat, it can be WhatsApp, it can be through Messenger, but it's generically called sexting, I think. You've got to be blooming careful, because what you're saying to somebody else may well be provocative sexually. It may well be harassing sexually. So even if you think it's funny, you're sexting with somebody else, you've got to be careful. But you've got to be careful as well that you're doing this with an understanding that actually, if somebody asks you for something, a picture, which might be a nude or a semi-nude or something like that, you might feel under a lot of pressure to do that. And that's bullying, it's harassing, and it can be grooming as well.
Yeah, especially as well if you've got a young person who's under the age of 16 and they're having what they think is an innocent conversation with someone of their age, and they get talking sexually and they start to exchange images. In fact, they might not realise that that's against the law, isn't it?
Well, it is against the law. And so before you can encourage anybody or receive from anybody images of a sexual nature, that person sending has to be over the age of 18. So consent to sexual intercourse 16, images of a sexual nature 18.
Which some people might be, quite surprised about, because I think when people think that they reach the age of 16, they can start making all those decisions about those sexual kind of communications, whether that's physically in person or electronically, but in fact, it's not quite right.
No, I think that people don't really understand. They sit perhaps in their living room or their bedrooms and they have their device in their hands and they think that they're just communicating with the one person. But once you've said it, once it's out there, once it's on the internet, even if you think it's a private message, actually the advice would be, if you can't print this off to a massive poster and stand in the middle of Hightown where you live for everybody to see it. Don't put it on the internet.
Yeah, that might be some good advice actually, but I'm
Yeah.
not actually advising anybody does that.
No. But if you wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, then possibly you need to think twice about doing that. So allegations then that might be made, and we come across this, it's very sad, but we get an awful lot of youngsters who are accused of sexual impropriety in one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. And it's serious. You know, if you're convicted of a sexual offence, it can lead to being subject to the notification requirements under the Sexual Offenders Register. And it's serious. It's life-changing for people.
Massively. Not least of all because your social standing, your peers, everybody knows about it. School, college, your employer, etc., will know about it. So what's the advice to somebody, Abby, would you say, if somebody said to them today, oh, you've been sexually criminal, excuse me, sexually inappropriate, in any kind of allegation whatsoever that brings about the suspicion that that person has acted in some way in a criminal manner as far as the Sexual Offences Act is concerned. What's your advice to that person?
Number one, if the police are involved, don't speak to the police without a solicitor present, and get underway and instruct a solicitor ASAP, because actually it needs to be dealt with in a very controlled manner, doesn't it? We've been on lots of cases where it's the control that we take from that investigation away from the police that actually really puts the person in a really good position. And frequently that's been young, vulnerable people, hasn't it, that have been, you know, actually susceptible to certain allegations by peers, by people that they feel that they've got a very good relationship with, and they're quite surprised when they learn that they've either lied or they've misconstrued the truth about them, and it can be quite shocking. So you need to, number one, not speak to the police without a solicitor present, because as nice as the police are, and they're lovely and they keep us all safe, but they're not your friends. They are investigating you, and you need to instruct the solicitor to get that advice at the earliest opportunity.
Of course, people don't know the law. And
No.
if they don't know the law, they don't know that the next sentence out their mouth might be an admission.
Definitely. Some people don't realise something as simple as stroking someone's hair could be a sexual assault. People are shocked by that, you know, and that's just one quite minor example. The examples are wide ranging. And how many times have we been sat opposite clients in conference where we sit down and explain the law and they're quite shocked?
Yeah.
And so if they were interviewed before they knew that, before they had a solicitor, they'd be putting themselves in quite a vulnerable position.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've been doing this a blooming long time. And I can tell you that sometimes I get clients that come back from the police station from other firms, and I think, why did that solicitor let this client talk at all, say anything? And you need to be very careful. If the police have contacted you, everything you say from the very first moment you speak to that police officer is recorded. It's called a significant statement, and you can make it and it becomes evidence.
Even if it's a voluntary interview, because people like to emphasize the voluntary, but actually it makes no difference whether it's voluntary or whether you've been arrested. It does, in the respect of you're not being placed in a cell necessarily at 3 o'clock in the morning, but actually it makes no difference in terms of the law and how serious it might be that the allegation is that you face. And if they're investigating you and you're called in for an interview, they are investigating you and they are willing to use that evidence against you.
Yeah, well, they have to, don't they? If you make a significant statement, it has to go in the balance. The voluntary interview always puts people at ease, because something that you do voluntarily appears to be something of your own choice. So you're more relaxed about it. And of course, the police have got their own reasons why they might ask for a voluntary interview. Perhaps it's custody time, it's custody time limits, etc., which we'll talk about. I think we have spoken about on previous podcasts but we'll be doing more on that. That's not the purpose of today. The purpose of today is to understand that as a young person, as a child, maturing through those milestones of 12 Gillick, 16 sexual consent, 18 being an adult, but even at 18, be careful if you're dating a 16-year-old, because your strength of your relationship is taken into account as to whether you can or can't. Be careful what you're saying on the internet. Be careful who you're speaking to. If ever you are in any doubt whatsoever about somebody contacting you through social media, raise it with somebody else. You can go confidentially to anybody and just get somebody to check that out, because there are a lot of criminals out there, pedophiles out there. They're using social media. They are so very good at it. You'll think you're talking to somebody of your age and you really are not. So be very careful. Don't trust people with naked pictures of yourself or anything that you wouldn't like to be out there on the internet. And if at some time you are accused of doing something which is unlawful or in any way predatory, then speak to a solicitor. Don't think, I haven't done anything wrong, nothing to hide. Use a solicitor. Go. You'll remember, Abby, we've spoken about solicitors in the past over many years, where we say, go and interview your solicitor.
Yeah, definitely. You need to feel comfortable with them, because particularly if you are a young person, as we've discussed in the podcast, you might be speaking about some quite sensitive issues. And so you need to like your solicitor firstly and trust them, because they may well be shielding you from some quite serious allegations.
Yeah, and giving you advice on what you should and shouldn't say. And of course, a solicitor would never, ever encourage anybody to lie, but actually telling the police the correct story in the correct manner is essential. Absolutely
Definitely.
essential. So to sum up, Abby,
I think you've already summed it up quite well, to be honest with you. I think taking it through from Gillick competent right through to the age of 16, 18, etc. There are so many different legal issues. It's very complicated. And of course, if you've got any questions or want to learn more, then you should get in touch with us immediately and we'd be happy to assist you.
yeah, definitely. Abby, I love working with you. You're just great, to be honest. I see the way you look after clients and I see the results you get for them. You're an amazing solicitor. And seriously, anybody listening to this podcast, any doubts about anything, and just reach out to Abby or myself, and we'll make sure that you get the right advice. Doesn't matter where you are. The telephones work all around the country. Get in touch.
Definitely. Well, I've learned from the best. Thanks very much, Michael.